Now I'm ready. Okay, so mercantilism. If you thought capitalism was hard to define, mercantilism is probably even harder. So, you're welcome. Mercantilism, let's break this down. Basically, it is a country trying to get as rich as they can. It breaks down to a country's trying to get as rich as they can. How do they try to get as rich as they can? Well, they want to export or sell more than they import or take in. Export is things you sell out to other parts of the world. Import is things you buy from other parts of the world. So the goal in mercantilism is to sell more or export more than you import. But it's tied to colonialism. It's very much tied to colonialism, at least in history. Mercantilism is basically, you get a country like England, and they want to get rich. They want to make a lot of manufactured goods, finished products. That means the shirt, not the cotton. So what do? Well, England, for example, in mercantilism, they would go to India, and they took over India. Militarily took over India. They had the strongest navy, strong military. They had more advanced weapons we talked about, and they're able to take over India. Then what they do is they make the people of India grow a product like, cotton or tea leaves. Yes?
What was India using to defend themselves?
Good question. The technology they had would have been well behind the guns and the other things that England had. Those weapons were more developed. As we saw, most of Europe, they got a lot of those weapon ideas from the Islamic world, and they spreadly diffused throughout Europe. So their weapons would have been much more advanced, where India, I don't know exactly what weapons they would have been using, but were nowhere near as advanced as what was in England. So the products are made in India. No, I'm sorry, my bad. The products are grown in India. Your raw materials, your cotton, your tea leaves, those kind of materials. Then what England does is they take a finished product. So let's just say it's cotton. Let's just say it's cotton. So they take the cotton, they make it into a shirt, then they sell it back to India and everywhere else in the world. Or they have them grow the tea leaves on plantations, and then the tea company comes in, and what they do is they manufacture it as tea that they can sell, and they sell it to everybody. So what we're seeing in mercantilism is the country that's often referred to as the mother country, or the country that's taking over countries. They take the resources from all over the world, make a product, and sell it for a profit. They buy the resources at a low price, and they sell the product at a higher price. Now what this will lead to is places like England will become very wealthy doing this. France will become very wealthy. Germany does this later in the game. They get involved. The Netherlands do this in Indonesia, and all over the world we see this. Go ahead.
Do they still do this?
You know, some people would say yes, some people would say no. In fact, there's many poor countries in the world who are in debt. And one thing that the UN and the IMF, who are kind of control the world economy today, tell them, well, you got to pay your debt, so why don't you grow more products? Where a lot of people are making the argument, no, maybe they shouldn't be growing products. Maybe they should be investing in manufacturing their own products. Because one kind of rule of economics is that if you're just growing and selling a resource, like cotton, but you're not selling shirts, that you're never going to make that much money. Does that make sense? If you're just selling bananas, you're not going to make as much money as the country that's selling a finished product, like computers or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So it's not forced. There's no like military taking over and those things. That's not happening at all. So some say yes, some say no. It all depends who you're talking to, what they believe. So anyway, England was doing this in the Americas. In the Americas, they were doing this with tobacco products. Later on, cotton gets involved in it a little bit, and also they go in India, tea, other products. Like the British tea companies were huge in India, making a lot of money off India. So as you can see, what this means is the European powers will become very wealthy. And let's take a look at what happens in Africa real quick. Well, we'll get to Africa in just a minute, my bad. Now let's take a look at other parts in the world. You just kind of see on a map here. We have Great Britain, you have France, you have Spain. You have the Dutch Republic. And what we see here is that They go over to parts of the New World, the Americas. They take over land. And you can see here many of the products. We see gold, silver, sugar, tobacco, and manufactured goods. You can see here are what the Europeans sell back. And manufactured goods you make more money off of. So you get the, you get, for example, the tobacco over here. Then you sell back the cigarettes and the finished. So you get just basically a tobacco plant. Then you sell back the manufactured goods, the cigarettes, whatever, what have you. You sell that back. So when you're selling a manufactured good, you make more money. Yes?
How did the French get between the Spanish and the English?
Just where France is? Oh, here you mean? In this area? This is where France kind of like took over their area. And they started up here in the river near Quebec, Canada, and kind of like worked their way in. And England came this way. And then England also discovered the Hudson Bay right here. What happens is eventually England wins over this. Actually, the United States takes over this land. Britain kicks out the French. The United States takes over this land. And this part of here actually stays French-speaking Canada all the way till this day. That's Quebec. And they still speak French there today. Say it again?
Doesn't Canada still find France for that land though? Like right now, and they're voting over it?
Well, they're voting over whether Quebec, French-speaking Canada, will become a separate country. Yeah, that vote's going to come up pretty soon. I don't think it has yet, but go ahead.
So was like the British colonies like in North America, were they like unable to start manufacturing stuff, or?
They weren't allowed. See, the thing in mercantilism is that the Americans wanted to make their own manufactured products or make more of them, but they weren't allowed. It's one of the reasons why they rebelled, because the Americans had to buy tea from England, because England was in India and making the tea, so they told the colonists, you have to buy our tea. You can't buy French tea. You got to buy ours. So you sell to your own colonies. It's one of the biggest reasons why it's the American Revolution. That's why America rebelled against England, because they knew they were being taken advantage of. Questions about that? Does that make sense? All right, so this is mercantilism. We see different products over here from India, and this happens over the world. And we can see this takes place not only in the Americas, it takes place in Africa, we'll point out in the next map, and China, not so much China, but India, Indonesia. And you can see by looking at this wall, I can kind of see how Europe is going to become really rich and powerful from about the year 1600 all the way until the end of the Second World War. All right, let's take a look at Africa now and what happens to Africa. Now, Africa, this is a map of Africa in 1914. And this is really important to go back and look at these sources because it just tells you a lot about the world. If I look at Africa in 1914, just look at this for a moment. What kind of sticks out to you? Look at the key, look at the map. What sticks out to you about this map? What do the colors mean? Go ahead.
Not many were independent.
Not many were independent. Excellent observation. Keep going. Say it again. The green and the red stick out. That would be what two countries?
France and England.
France and England have a huge chunk of Africa. What's the what one? Yellow? Oh, we'll get there. We'll talk about Liberia in just a moment. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to talk about the French and the
Yeah, the French and the English have a ton. Belgium's a tiny little country, and they got this whole area, which is now called the Democratic Republic of Congo, and there's lots of border disputes going on here even to this day. We'll talk about borders. So what happens here in Africa is in 1898, 1899, there's a conference in Berlin. The 1898-99 conference was in Berlin, and what happens is pretty much the European powers get together, and they decide that, hey, we could fight over Africa and have wars about it, or we could just agree to divide it up. And England and France come out with more because they're more powerful. A lot of the other European nations are pretty much, okay, well, we could fight you for the land, but you'll probably end up with almost all of it if we fight, so they agree. Now, what's amazing about this is Africa's colonized, and when I first learned about this, I was thinking, why so late? I mean, colonization was happening in Asia for a long time before this, in India. Colonization in America was in the 1500s. The last major West African empire, we learned about the Songhai, fell in 1590. So why was it that Africa wasn't conquered? I was honestly thinking that, why did it wait so long? One of the reasons is that why Latin America is conquered so quickly, but Africa is conquered so slowly, has a lot to do with the role of disease. In Latin America, smallpox kills most of the native population. What happens to Europeans when they get into the interior of Africa? They get malaria. They get diseases. The disease works in the opposite way. So it stops the Europeans from being able to go in and take over Africa. So yes, the Europeans come in, they kidnap 9.5 to 10 million slaves, most of who end up, as we discussed, in the Caribbean and Brazil, 600,000 in the United States. But they're not able to get into the interior of Africa until a change in technology. The Gatling gun, which is basically the machine gun that you just kind of put on a stand and you can fire many, many, many rounds at a time, many bullets at a time. So what happens is if you want, like for example, in southern Africa, where the Zulu have a huge nation that takes a large chunk of Africa, a very powerful, strong, organized nation, however their technology wasn't as good as the Europeans. So in southern Africa, the Zulu fight against the Dutch and the English. The Dutch are able to defeat them, even though they have way smaller numbers, because they have machine guns. So in a battle, when the Zulu come and attack them, they're able to basically mow them down. And it's an unfair fight because of technology. So because of this, the Europeans slowly are able to get into Africa and colonize it. However, they still get sick and get diseases. And this is why we don't see as much of a European population actually in Africa. It's more like they're administering it. So now we see it being taken over. The Europeans draw the borders. The present-day borders of Africa were drawn by Europeans, not by Africans. And what happens is mercantilism happens. They come in, they take the resources out of Africa, and they make the finished products and sell them back to them and everybody else around the world. And they make a huge profit off this. And this map's made in 1914. Most of the African countries won't become free or independent until after World War II. The 1950s and 60s is the time when many of these countries become independent. So the reality is most African countries, if you hear about them in the news today, they're pretty new countries. And these borders, if they're having border disputes and fighting, well, guess what? They didn't draw the borders. So many of these borders divide different cultural groups, which is why, a big reason why there's still a lot of fighting that happens in Africa to this present day is because the Africans are not the ones who drew the original borders. Questions about that at all? Go ahead. The yellow, oh, I'll get to that real quick. Thank you very much. The yellow I need to get to. So we're looking at this, and the yellow does stand out, especially the Empire of Ethiopia stands out. Well, Ethiopia stands out because Ethiopia was never formally colonized. Ethiopia is the only country that was not colonized. Now, we can get one more. We could say the same about Liberia, but Liberia is a different situation. So Ethiopia is actually able to defeat the Italians who attempt to colonize it. And it remains an independent nation to this day. Now, Liberia is a very, very unique nation. Because Liberia is a nation where many former African slaves, the descendants in most cases, of African slaves, were able to come back and go back to Africa and live in Africa. The only real problem with this is most of the people, I mean, they've been living in America for generations. Then they went back to Liberia. So it'd be like, are they African? They have to relearn how to live in. They never lived in Africa. They're African Americans. They're not fully Africans. And there's a big difference between those two. There's a big difference between African American and African. And it's culturally, it's different. It's like a German and a German American. If I just plot me in the middle of Germany, it's not like I'm going to start speaking German. It's not going to happen. I'm going to have to learn it. I'm going to have to learn the language, learn about the culture. So that's Liberia. So I wanted to show you this just so you have an understanding that the mercantilism system took the resources away, and what it did was it enriched the European populations, but made the populations of Africa, Asia, India, those places poorer because of it. So we'll actually stop right there, and that's it. We're done for the year.